Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Improved Podcast, the official podcast of Classic Studios. I am your host, Chase Collins, and I'm an aspiring screenwriter who's also working a 9 to 5, like the rest of us, working to break into the industry, and I'm sort of documenting that journey on this podcast. And sometimes I'm joined by guests, and sometimes it's just me. And today it's going to be just me again. I have some big updates to share with you all, so I'm super excited to do all that. There's, of course, time codes in the description, so if you want to jump around before we get into all of that, go ahead. But I do want to say happy Monday, and I hope everyone's March is going well. I hope you set your goals for this week, whether it's, professional or personal or creative or just goals you want to set, and I hope you achieve them. And then next week when you come back, you can set goals again, and maybe if you didn't achieve goals last week, you can update your goals and figure out why you didn't achieve them or what you can do better or different or whatever. We can all work together to improve and get ourselves going in the right direction. So yeah, I'm super excited for this episode. I hope you all enjoy, and I'll be back after this intro music rolls to talk about all of those good updates. All right, peace.
Improve Podcast. Improve Podcast. Improve Podcast. Improve Podcast.
Whoa, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and I am so excited to share that I have completed my script, Mary Lee Barber. It is finished. I am super excited about that. I know these past couple of weeks I've been giving you all updates on that, and that I've been working towards it and making some really great progress, and I think last time I said I was in the fourth act, maybe about 75-80% of the way through, and over the course of the last week, I was able to wrap it up. Just super pumped. I do want to give maybe some background and quick information. I know if you've been listening throughout the last couple of months that I've been doing this podcast, you've lived through this screenwriting process for writing this script, but I wanted to, go back a little bit and do a bit of a retrospective and maybe talk about things that I enjoyed, things that I would have done differently, and what I'm going to do in the future for my next screenplay or next project or whatever ends up happening with this one. So yeah, I started working on this project in September of 2022, and it is now March 2023, so almost exactly 6 months I've been working on this. And funny thing, I was thinking about this as I was wrapping up, but I first sort of came up with this idea about Mary Lee Barber in 2017, so the summer between my junior year and senior year of college. And now, 6 years later, this story that I wanted to tell is out into the world, and it's now this tangible thing that's out of my head and can be read and sort of experienced by someone else if I were to share it. But yeah, so I'm just super excited. But about 6 months ago, so I already had the premise, right? In 2017, I came up with this idea. But then in 2017, and then about 6 months ago, September, I decided, okay, this is going to be my next feature that I write. I just wrote my first one. I want to get a second one under my belt, so that I have some base screenwriting experience. So this was going to be my next project, and I dusted the premise off the shelf, and I was like, then I immediately, first thing I did was go into the outlining phase and defining that story, because the main character already existed. It was Mary Lee Barber. I knew that was going to be the name of the film. I knew that was my main character, and that's what was sort of driving the story, was this character who was living in this new world with new technologies, new experiences. And in order to tell that story, right, it has to be more than just a character. So I was starting to add, plot and drama and character arcs and theming. And so that's really what I was doing for a lot of, the beginning of outlining phase, was just thinking about what the story was really going to be beyond just this character. And really what was driving the outlining and the story was the lesson that I wanted Mary Lee Barber to learn or come away from at the end of the film. So really what I was doing, I learned, or I realized now, was like sketching out a situation someone might go through in order to learn this lesson, right? But the problem was there was nothing driving the story. There was no plot. There was no stakes other than, okay, this person wants something and they need to get it, but there was no stakes. It was just very, okay, A plus B equals C. Here's the character. Here's the lesson that they learn. And so that was a problem that I knew, and I refused to start writing until I figured out, like, what is driving this story beyond the characters? What else is going to be happening with this story? So it took a lot of time, like probably over a month and a half, to figure out that problem in the outlining stage. And it took a lot of work, but it's definitely, I would probably say, like, the reason I was able to finish this story, because it gave me a goal for these characters to work towards. And, okay, once they reach their goal, they should have learned the lesson from the story that I'm trying to tell. So there was really, in the moment, it was like frustrating to try and make sure all of these pieces line up together, but it was totally worth it. It's what made the story work, I think, at the end of the day, was putting in all of that, work in the planning phase, the outlining phase, in order to make the writing go as well as it did. I mean, it didn't go well, right? So into the writing, once I started writing the actual story, I realized that, well, the first part of writing was super fun. It was really exciting. I was playing around with all these new characters that you just get to learn about, and you're starting to find their voice. And once I got through that little honeymoon phase after the climax of the first act, I guess, that's when progress sort of started like grinding to a halt, and it was like, okay, but what it was like something about where I was in the story, I couldn't push forward beyond that, and that was frustrating and like really perplexing. I don't really know why I couldn't get past that. Once I broke into that second act, I couldn't move forward. And I don't know if it was something like I didn't know how to approach the scene. I didn't know how to enter it. It was just something wasn't clicking once I got into that second act, which was weird. There's some type of resistance. So, and with my writing process, once I have the outline and the story down, I'll think about how I want the scene to sort of play out in my head, and like what beats need to happen within the scene in order to get to the next scene. And I'll be thinking about that over the period of a couple days or a couple weeks. And with this scene, I was never happy with the ideas that I came up with. And so I just kept thinking about them and kept thinking about them and kept thinking about them until it was like 2, 3, 4 weeks later. And suddenly like a month had gone by, and I still hadn't broken into this second act yet or gone beyond that. And so it's like, what is happening? So, my catchphrase it's turning into is, the only way out is through. That's what I like to tell myself. That's what I tell all my friends whenever they're going through anything, or people who are listening to me. But I was like refusing to go through this problem. I was just like, no, let me figure out how what's the best way to approach it, or how can I get through it or under it or around it. And eventually I had to just force myself, sit my butt down in the chair, put my fingers to the keyboard, and just start writing. And that was the only way to actually make progress, because I don't know, I could have just kept pontificating for the rest of my life about the best way to break into the scene. But as soon as I started writing it, it just flowed naturally and it worked. And that's when, these past 3 weeks, it was just like my brain was like a fire hose. It just couldn't turn off. I just kept writing and kept writing and kept writing until, boom, like 3 weeks later, I had a finished draft. It probably took me like 3 months to write the first third of the script, and then maybe like 3 weeks to write the last 2/3. And so it was crazy, just the amount of like the cork. I was, debilitating myself by overthinking this scene, I guess. And it's funny, like as I'm describing this to you, I'm thinking about Avatar: The Last Airbender in book 2, when Aang is learning about how to earthbend from Toph, and Aang, he comes from a air nomad tribe that's peaceful, and they're working on they approach. They're a peaceful organization. They're pacifists. They don't attack and they don't fight, and they try to redirect and dodge and redirect energy as opposed to fighting stuff. And that was very much in conflict with the earthbending nation and their style of fighting. They approach problems head on. They don't avoid the issue. They don't go around anything. They put their skull to the rock and break that thing open. And that's what I had to do for this script. So I needed to let go of my airbending personality and become more of a rock bender, as they say. So that was a bit of fun, having that epiphany while I was describing this thing. But now I'm off track from my outline, and I gotta get back on track. But yeah, so I've finished the draft, and I'm so excited to be done with it. It's like this weird feeling of being super excited to be done with a project and like happy with the project itself, but then also so excited to start moving on to the next project. And I know I sort of teased that last week, so I'm not going to get into too much detail with that. I want to finish up talking about what's next for Mary Lee Barber specifically. And to be honest with you, like, I'm happy with having finished it, but I'm not super happy with like the quality of the draft. I think there's a lot that needs to be improved with the draft. It's like not very good. It's in rough shape. Okay. There's a lot of work that needs to be put into it. So, but before I do that, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to put it away for at least like 3, probably closer to 6 months. And, one of the mistakes I made with writing my first screenplay was not giving myself a break between drafts. I think I started driving into the rewrite like the day after I finished writing it, and I probably wasted like a couple of months of work just because I dove back into writing it without giving myself a break and letting the script breathe. So that's what I want to do with Mary Lee Barber. I want to put it away for at least 3 months to give it some breathing time. Let me forget about the characters. Let me go back into it from a more unbiased perspective. So that's what I want to do for at least 3 months, and then between that time, I'm going to start working on other projects. I want to write a short film. I want to edit my first screenplay and work on, that secret project that I've been talking about. And then I'll come back to Mary Lee Barber, and really polish it up. It's like a tight script. I don't know. It's really tight. It came in to about 95 pages, so right at what I wanted to have it be at. I think that's a good tight number. And it's also like the most commercially viable script that I think I've written, and the concept is very commercially viable. It has a lot to do with pop culture phenomenons that are really, in the zeitgeist right now. And I think it would just be like, I could see it on like a Netflix or a Paramount or like a Peacock, show. I could see, or a streaming service. I could see this movie being like one of their originals just because it's so marketable. So I'm really excited about it. It, of course, needs to be tightened up, but that's like ultimately the goal. I'd like to get this sold to like a Netflix type of company. I think that would be really cool. All right, but yeah, in terms of goals and updates and progress and stuff, I'm starting to work on my next project, which is rewriting Touch, getting that polished and ready for some real professional like industry stuff. Like, I'm excited to start working towards that avenue. Like, I feel like these past year or so that I've been writing, it's been learning the craft and becoming familiar with like what makes a good script. And I've only written 2, so I don't think like mine are great by any means, but I feel more confident that I could talk to folks in the industry and not look like a complete moron. And that was, one of the first things I heard when screenwriting was, if you ever go to like a meeting with an agent or a manager or producers, the first thing they're going to ask you is like, what else do you have? If they like your script, the first thing they'll ask is, what else do you have? And so I wanted to have an answer to that. So when I start pitching Touch, I want, if people ask me like, what else do you have? It's like, oh, well, I have this other completed script that's needs to be polished, but it's a starting point for another very marketable property and project. So that is why I wrote 2 screenplays before I really started wanting to try and break in with my screenplay touch. Now, if I was really doing this by the books, I think most people would say like you should write like 10 scripts before you even start trying to think about considering yourself as good or industry quality. But hey, I'm a little biased, right? I think I can write. So we're just gonna start with the first couple of screenplays. Let's start getting them sold while we work on other scripts and stuff like that. So that's what I'm gonna be working on, getting that thing polished and ready. And I am excited. I have like a really cool, fun, creative idea for how I'm going to do that, and I want to do like a dedicated episode to my approach for breaking into the industry. I think it'll be a really fun episode of the podcast and valuable for me to sort of like verbalize this idea and this approach to breaking into the industry, and we'll see if it works out. That'll probably come out in like a couple of weeks, excuse me. I have a couple of episodes lined up for these next 2 weeks, so in a couple weeks you'll hear from me again. And with that, I do want to say that I hope you all achieve your goals this week. Thank you for listening, thank you for sharing, and thank you for leaving reviews. And I want to also say thanks for letting me do these solo episodes. I know it's not normally what we do. Normally there's a guest and the structure is a little bit different, but I've really been enjoying these solo episodes, and I hope you've been too. I really, really value the time and talking to y'all once a week or so. It's great. I also want to give a huge shout out to Green Bean at Green Bean Music for all of our musical theme songs. He is the best. And I think I will talk to you all next week for another episode of the Improve Podcast. All right, goodbye.
Podcast.